U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to make a public announcement later on today from the Oval Office, following, of course, days of rumors as well as speculation about his health. And while the announcement has been teased as related to the Pentagon and the possible renaming of the Department of Defense to the Department of War, today's press event is the first that the 79-year-old president has held in days and comes after a weekend of false rumors about his demise that went viral on social media. For more on this, let's now welcome our U.S. correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease, who is currently tracking the story for us. So, Sherwin, a very good afternoon to you now. The president posting there on social media on Sunday that he had never felt better in his life, but not before, of course, the rumor mill had its way about his possible demise. How did all this speculation come about? Because I remember when he attended the FIFA World Cup, there was pictures that were doing the rounds about his swollen ankles as well as that makeup patch on his wrist.
Yeah, he's been wearing a concealer on the bruising on above his right hand, akin to what you saw Queen Elizabeth II in that final appearance. I think she was welcoming a reception for Liz Truss, the former Prime Minister, when she was resigning. And remember the bruising she had on her arm, and days later, of course, we got the sad news that the Queen had passed. I got calls from South Africa over the weekend saying to me, is this true? I said, what are you talking about? And so I then had to sort of take a deep dive into the online speculation, right? Things that go viral. And this, I think, is really a good point to re-emphasize that everybody out there should always trust traditional media sources, verify and verify again, because things can go viral very quickly in the current social media forensic world that we all live in, right? The hashtags were, where is Trump? Hashtag Trump is dead. Hashtag Trump died. And of course, we then saw the president leave the White House on Saturday morning to go and play golf, which he did again on Sunday. So that speculation put to rest. But it began because the last public appearance, Alicia, that the president had was during a cabinet meeting on Tuesday last week. I think it was August 26th. And then his public schedule went quiet for the remainder of the week. And then we went into a long Labour weekend. Yeah, so essentially the president, out of the norm, essentially, was absent from the public eye, and this led to speculation. There was, of course, a diagnosis from the White House physician in July. The president was diagnosed with chronic venous insufficiency, and this talks to a lack of circulation of blood in the legs and in the arms. I've lost my comms, just call me back. It speaks to a lack of circulation in the veins and arms, and so the concern then is that the blood isn't traveling back to the heart, and so there has been some concern. The White House physician putting out a note in July, Alicia, that the bruising on the hand was consistent with minor soft tissue irritation from frequent handshaking and his use of aspirin as a standard cardiovascular prevention regimen. But the president, according to the White House physician, remains in excellent health. I will just also refer to an interview the Vice President J.D. Vance gave to USA Today on Friday, I believe it was, and he said that the president remains in incredibly good health. Yes, terrible tragedies happen, but he was confident that the president was in good shape, Alicia. But were the worst case scenario to arrive, he would be ready, having been, based on his on-the-job training for the past 200 days, to assume the position of commander-in-chief. But essentially, the official word from the White House, from all the officials close to the president, Alicia, is that the president remains in good health, and I think we'll see that on display when he addresses the media at around 8 p.m. South African time.
And that's exactly it that we want to know, Sherwin. I mean, we do understand he's going to this afternoon hold a press announcement right in the Oval Office. I saw a picture of him earlier, but I mean, with the pictures that have been making the rounds, people saying it's probably AI-generated images. So what might we expect, given, of course, the number of issues from tariffs to the deployment of the National Guard to places like Chicago, and, of course, the state federal courts win that Trump's deployment of the National Guard troops in Los Angeles this summer was in fact illegal, Sherwin?
Yeah, there are so many issues that could be part of the conversation. Despite the president, we understand that this will be in relation to an announcement in relation to the Pentagon. The Trump administration essentially wants to rename the Department of Defense to what it was many decades ago, the Department of War. But I doubt that the media in the room is going to want to sort of take a deep dive into that decision. There are so many other issues, as you mentioned. A federal judge in San Francisco ruling this morning that the deployment of the military, the Marines and the National Guard to to Los Angeles, to help quell protests, anti-immigration enforcement protests in that region was illegal. And it speaks to the current narrative you're hearing from the president today in terms of wanting to deploy a similar contingent of National Guard to cities like Chicago, where he believes, in fact, he tweeted earlier today that Chicago is the murder capital of the world. In addition to that, late on Friday night, a Washington, D.C. federal appeals court ruled in a 7-4 decision that most of Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs on nations around the world, including South Africa's 30%, were illegal, that the president exceeded his powers in terms of the International Emergency Powers Act, which essentially gives the president the power to address, quote, unusual and extraordinary threats during national emergencies. The appeals court did not believe that the president had the authority to impose tariffs in terms of that Emergency Powers Act. And of course, then confirming a lower court decision, the Court of International Trade here in New York, ruling in May that the president had exceeded his powers. So two subsequent court cases have now essentially ruled that these tariffs are illegal. So the question then for nations around the world is, what do we do, right? And a lot of nations are currently negotiating new trade deals based on the imposition of those unilateral tariffs from the United States. But of course, this is now a matter. The White House has signaled that they will go to the Supreme Court for a final decision on this matter. So a lot of speculation as to where we might go in terms of Donald Trump's deployment of the National Guard to cities around the United States. And of course, with international flavor, his imposition of tariffs and where we might go from there. So this is not going to be a press conference later today that is focused on the Department of Defense. It is likely to focus on a number of issues of international import, Alicia.
Absolutely, Sherwin. Thank you so much for that live update there. That is our U.S. correspondent, Mr. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, of course, who's tracking some of those developments as President Donald Trump is said to update later on this afternoon.